Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I am your host, Courtney Anderson. I really appreciate you joining me on the show today. We have a program. This is specifically episode number 166. Episode number 166. This is our 166th show of Solutions with Courtney Anderson. And thank you for being part of our community and helping make that happen. This is a show that is part of the Satisfaction Saturation series. Our Satisfaction Saturation series is, of course, all about those individuals who have surpassed their goals. They have achieved the things they set out to achieve. They've achieved things they never even dreamed of. They are those individuals who look around and they say, wow, look at this. I'm at the top of the mountain. I've made it to the highest level of an organization, a career, an accomplishment, an award. And yet, with that satisfaction, which we spend a lot of time, of course, in all of the things that we discuss in our shows and all of the programs and corporate education and training programs and resources that I provide, we talk so much about surpassing our goals, right? Getting there, the journey. Of course, that is going to result in, once we surpass those goals, then what? And that's what Satisfaction Saturation is about. The series is all about looking at the entire life cycle. So we surpass that goal, and now what? Okay, we're going to have a little bit of satisfaction. Woo! We're going to celebrate. We're going to be thrilled and happy and proud that we've surpassed that goal. And then, at a certain point, we ask the question, now what? We also have to deal with the side effects, almost like with medication, right? We know that most of our medication, we make a decision with our medical provider and we look at all the positive things that this can help me with, and we look at all the side effects, and then we make a decision about what's the right thing for us to do. Based on science and data, working with our qualified medical professionals, sometimes we might need a second or third opinion, but we're going to get the best information we possibly can to help us decide, should I take this medication? And if so, and what dose and what sort of protocol? There's side effects. And even the medication that may be the most wonderful thing that improves the quality of our life and improves the quantity of our life, it just may be the greatest thing ever, it's going to have some sort of a side effect. It may be that the side effects are nothing that I even notice. It may be that the side effects are something that I need to be aware of. No matter what, I need to know what they potentially are before I go ahead and take the medication, right? Okay, that's what all the little paperwork is when we get medication. All those little notes are telling us, hey, not saying it will happen, just saying it could happen. And if it does, you need to know ahead of time so you can be prepared. That's the question we have to deal with when we look at surpassing our goals. And again, so much of what we do in our programs, and certainly what you see in any self-help, personal empowerment, management techniques, leadership skills, anything that you are going to get out there as a resource, right? A program, training, a book. It's all about how to do it, because that's what we need to. That's the first part of this, right? How do I do it? But not a lot of these resources answer the question, what happens after you do it? Because there's a whole nother potential area of changes and things in your life that you need to be aware of as a side effect. And not that they're going to make you change your decision to go ahead and pursue surpassing your goals. But you need to know about them, think about them, and then once you get there, of course, in this series, all we're doing is trying to work through some of these and be aware of them so that when it happens, if it happens, you know what to do. And so Satisfaction Saturation, of course, episode number 166, our specific show topic today. Our specific show topic today is, I am used to having things my way, and I have no patience when they aren't. I am used to having things my way, and I have no patience when they aren't. Help me. And this is a show topic that, again, when you're on the earlier part of your sort of life cycle of surpassing your goals, you might not even think about, hey, what's going to happen after I become financially independent? What's going to happen after I achieve that professional goal of the highest ranking I can achieve? What's going to happen after I um, have gotten to a point where I have a diversified income stream and asset portfolio? What do I do then? And a lot of us, again, don't think about this. We're just so focused on getting there, which makes sense. And a good analogy, I think, is sort of like, if you ever known anybody who's was out of shape and or overweight, and then they got into incredible shape. They surpassed any goal anyone could imagine. They got into shape and they're incredibly healthy, and they also may have lost weight and or toned up, and so they're going to look differently. They're going to fit into different size clothing. They're going to want to be often displaying this fit body differently than they were before. And and if you've ever read or listened or heard someone talk about this or experienced it yourself, you know that you don't often prepare for what it does to you mentally. To be in this place where your physicality is something that you just want to show the world because you're just so proud of all of the fitness and nutrition and health choices of your exercise program that you've utilized, and people don't necessarily prepare for it. I've even seen some shows where people say that they weren't prepared for the way that other people treated them differently, right? Because now they have a very different physical appearance in some ways, and they weren't prepared for that. And it's somewhat analogous to what happens when somebody goes through and reaches their professional goals and surpasses their economic and financial goals and career goals. Now what? And that's what this show topic, it's a little tough, even just to mention it, right? This idea that somebody's so used to having things their way that they really don't have a lot of patience and or tolerance when they don't go the way they want. Yet, we all know that we're not going to be able to move forward. And of course, Satisfaction Saturation series is all about acknowledging just because I've surpassed some other goals doesn't mean I'm done with the totality of goals in my life. I have to continue to be focused on my current experience. And I also ideally need to have something in the future that I'm thinking about or planning for or working towards. Otherwise, people can become very despondent and depressed because they sort of say, well, what more is there? Well, of course, there's always something different. And we actually did a show about that, about making sure we don't get complacent. This show, though, is talking about sort of the emotional and psychological changes that happen as a result of surpassing those goals. Patience, tolerance takes a hit. And I always encourage you to come to CourtneyAnderson.com. That is, of course, our central site where we're furiously adding our new content. It's where we have the blog. It's where we have the television video programs. It's where we have, of course, all of these audio talk show radio programs and all of our articles and everything. So please come to CourtneyAnderson.com. As always, this, of course, is episode 166. So on CourtneyAnderson.com, there's an entire page, our show page, our episode page, which is all about this show. And I know that this topic, again, can be a little close to home for people. Because we always want to look at all these wonderful wonderful outcomes of surpassing our goals. And to even acknowledge that, okay, great, we surpassed these goals, we're in this wonderful situation in many, many, many ways, right? Just like taking that great medicine or just like getting in wonderful physical shape. Yet, we have to be mindful and vigilant that there are side effects. And one of the side effects that's been documented is this idea that as we have so much abundance and opportunity because we've surpassed our goals, right? So we're high ranking at our business or our career, our profession, or we've received the highest award in our artistic field. If we have achieved, again, financial independence and we have options, and or we're largely on the way so that we have many, many financial resources to allow us to make different choices. It is not comfortable for most of us to talk about it all. This documented issue for many people where we become more impatient and we become less tolerant. Yeah, like everything else we do in all of these programs, I mean, we are not going to be able to continue to work toward the optimal quality of life for us individually, being of service to ourselves and to others, treating ourselves with kindness, having more good days than bad days. That's the whole concept, of course, practicing the joyful art of business. It's not going to happen if we're sitting around putting our head in the sand and pretending like these things aren't real. So when you go to the show notes, again, CourtneyAnderson.com, this is episode 166. And I do also want to note that we have made so many changes by growing all these programs and adding to this part of our business. We have settled on the permanent RSS feed for the show. So if you were an early community member, you might need to make sure you update and change the information where you're receiving the feed for our show, because it's CourtneyAnderson.net. /RSS. So the RSS feeds at CourtneyAnderson.net/RSS. So just in case you were finding our show somewhere else, make sure you have the correct feed that you're using to pull the show, whether it's in iTunes or anywhere else. Like I said, this is a bit uncomfortable. And of course, in full disclosure, as I do in these shows, it's a bit uncomfortable for me. Because this is something that I have to admit is a challenge. As time has gone by, and you only see these things in retrospect, in hindsight, when you sort of turn around and look back at what's happened in your life, and you think, wow, that's okay, I surpassed that goal or whatever. All of us are caught up in the daily, today. I got to take care of my things on my plate today. I got to, take a shower and brush my teeth. I mean, I got, every day we have all of our stuff to do each day. So we very rarely do people sit around thinking about things they've done, in terms of surpassing their goals or any other metric, right? That's why we've done shows we talked about regret. That's something we really don't want to put any time into, because what can we do with it? Nothing. The challenge, though, and this is something that I've had, again, it's uncomfortable for me, but this thing with patience and the idea that, especially as you've surpassed more and more goals, you're going to develop some side effects as a result of that, and as a result of some of the things that caused you to surpass your goals. And again, these are not things that we probably think of when we're starting the journey to surpass our goals, but they're definitely things that as we move down the path of surpassing our goals, and as we surpass more and more goals, that we have to handle and deal with. So on the show note page, which of course you can get to CourtneyAnderson.com, and there's links to the show note in the tags on each of your files. So no matter where you found our show or downloaded it, you should have the link available to the page, so you can come and get the full show notes. When we talk about this idea of being impatient, right, and not having tolerance, what are we talking about? There's a TED Talk that I have a link to the show page, and it has a great quote that I think encapsulates exactly what we're talking about. So again, let's think of somebody that we would look at externally. So it's not you. Like, let's make it easy. Let's look at somebody else, right, who surpassed their goals. So they, won the gold medal or multiple gold medals. They're the best sport person in the world for their sport. So they won the Olympic medals. They've won the world championships. They're the best artist. They won the leading award, whatever it is, in acting and theater and music. They've won those things in writing, in science. Okay, so they're literally have surpassed goals that at some level you can't even surpass. It literally is the highest of the highest. Okay, the best of the best, the most renowned of the category. Okay, so we're talking about them, not us, right? How did they do that? So much in our programs, I continue to come back to these ideas that we're not going to sit around and just wait. Talk a lot about action. I talk constantly about outcomes and choices and decisions, because you have to get stuff done. One of the reasons that people accomplish and surpass their goals at these very high levels is because of confidence. And again, if you look in the show notes, you'll see that I have a definition for confidence. And confidence, from this definition, is from a psychology professor at Ohio State University. It says, confidence is the stuff that turns thoughts into action. Oh, that's beautiful, right? Confidence is the stuff that turns thoughts into action. Oh, that's beautiful. And we've used this quote before and talked about this in other contexts, this idea of confidence, right? It turns thoughts into action. That's beautiful. Action is the stuff that you use to get stuff done. Action is it. It is everything. And so when I mentioned in the show notes, that quote's there in the show notes, the confidence quote, and also this quote from a TED Talk from another professor. And confidence, we spend so much time, right? I hate these sort of labels, but we're generically going to label that a good thing. It's a good thing. Stuff that turns thoughts into action. Confidence, right? Good thing. But let's look at this from the TED Talk. As a person's levels of wealth increase, their feelings of compassion and empathy go down, and their feelings of entitlement, of deservingness, and their ideology of self-interest increases. I'm going to read that again. As a person's levels of wealth increase, of course, that's what we're working on, right? Getting our financial independence. If we have financial independence, enhancing that, because we never know what could happen. So it's good to have a backup plan and additional resources. So as a person's levels of wealth increase, their feelings. Okay, now we're talking about feelings, and this is really important. It's one of the reasons why when we do the foundational principle of joyful art of business, that's why we're talking about feelings, because they really matter much more than people give them, I think, enough time and attention to when we're talking about our business and professional goals. All right, so as a person's levels of wealth increase, their feelings of compassion and empathy go down. So compassion and empathy is my ability to put myself in somebody else's shoes and my ability to feel for other people, right? Their feelings of entitlement and of deservingness and their ideology of self-interest increases. Now again, this is not something that most of us are comfortable. It's potentially, I'm just labeling it a potential side effect. A side effect of what? Of wealth increasing. Specifically, this is talking about. Now, of course, when we talk about suppressing our goals, financial independence is one of many goals, right? And what I'm doing is I'm not but I'm actually trying to extrapolate this finding and just apply it generically to surpassing other goals. And that's why I was saying earlier, it could be a sporting goal, it could be a career goal, it could be an artistic goal, it could be a scientific goal, it could be any kind of goal. It could be honestly could be reaching a goal as a volunteer. It could be anything that where we're feeling and perceiving that we're surpassing those goals, right? So this specific quote though is only talking about wealth increasing, and the findings only specifically apply to that. So I'm casting the net larger and putting forward the argument that potentially they may apply to other accomplishments. So wealth increase, compassion, empathy go down. Feelings of entitlement. I'm entitled to this. I deserve this, right? And the ideology of self-interest increases. So impatience, right? I'm not patient. I'm not waiting for this to happen. We can see that if we're having higher and higher feelings of entitlement, of deservingness, and my own self-interest is increasing, that I'm going to have less, or I'm going to have potentially diminished reserves of patience, of waiting around for something to happen. That's and we can see this. So again, go to the show page. That quote is in there in the link to the article, so you can go and look and see the TED Talk yourself and look into that data a little bit and see what you think. I made the argument before that part of the reason why we're having these side effects, right? Surpassing the goal, and then compassion, empathy going down, entitlement, deservingness going up, is because of being related to what got you to the point for your goal to be met and surpassed. Often what got you there was this idea of working on your confidence. And not just working on it, but often what gets you to the point is that you really do have confidence. So it's not your imagination. It's not something where you are thinking that maybe you'll be a confident person, but you really have it. Legitimately, you are confident. And that's confident. The confidence is the stuff that turns thoughts into action. It's what makes you do it. Get stuff done. Make it happen, right? I did a show, right? We're going to replace the word try with the word do, because we're going to get away from this whole sort of, well, maybe I'll try that. No, I'm going to do this to change our thinking so that we're action oriented. Now, most of us, again, we would think, well, I put so much work into my confidence, right? We have so many programs and resources devoted, this whole industry, right? Helping people develop and build their confidence and self-esteem. I do programs where we address it somewhat. Uh, the issue though is if you go through this path and you do have the confidence, you do have that ability to turn your thoughts into action. Potentially, it's not a guarantee, but potentially you may get to a point where, as a result of you manifesting that confidence and getting stuff done and surpassing your goals, you may have these positive financial outcomes, these positive career outcomes, these positive health outcomes, or anything else, and that may cause you to have more of a feeling that you're entitled to these things, that you deserved it. And we can sort of see the logic just behind it, right? So, you go to the person who, wow, you just, you won the best lead actor role, as in the international award for acting. You won an Oscar. It makes sense that you could see the person thinking potentially, well, yeah, maybe I did win the award because I deserved it. Or somebody winning the Olympics gold medal and thinking, yeah, I won it because I deserved it. I ran the fastest. I jumped the highest. I swam the fastest. I was the best. You could see somebody even, somebody won salesperson of the month. And they may say, yeah, I won salesperson of the month because I sold the most stuff. I did it. I deserved it. And again, we do programs. We've done programs in this show, and where we talk about celebrating our accomplishments, right? Being healthy, where we don't try to negate the things that we do that are positive, right? We want to celebrate and take that moment. Good job, right? You did it. Salesperson of the month. You won the Oscar, whatever it is. We don't necessarily realize that in this quest to surpass our goals, what happens on the other side after we do surpass the goal. And if part of the equation that we need to think about, even if it is uncomfortable, which I personally have admitted that it is uncomfortable. I have a feeling of entitlement, of deservingness, an ideology of self-interest increase, compassion, empathy go down. That's uncomfortable. Now we're talking about the what, right? What happens? What's this thing about not having patience? And that's exactly what that source was talking about there, right? Less compassion, empathy, more entitlement, deservingness, ideology of self-interest. Why it happens, I'm putting forward my interpretation myself. That part of it is that the confidence is often what leads us to get that stuff done. The challenge, though, is the confidence is what makes us get stuff done. So the more you go and you get stuff done, and then you, especially with hindsight, you look and you see, well, hey, I got that done. It reinforces the behavior, right? It worked. I had the confidence. I turned the thoughts into action. I had the goal. I not just met that goal, but I surpassed and I achieved goals I didn't even think of initially. And you look around and you think, wow. And then it just reinforces itself, because then you think, well, now I definitely have more confidence, right? And again, this can be a very positive thing. It can take you to the next goal. It can take you to, we talked about in other programs in our satisfaction saturation series, because this is all relative. So we talked about the people who are the wealthiest people in the world. Many times we read and hear from them. They're not just going to sit somewhere doing nothing, celebrating all day, every day that they, achieved and maybe even sustained for a bit, being the wealthiest person in the world by some metrics. No, they're out doing new things. And many of the times they're doing issues that are far beyond their original business goals. They're doing a lot of things in trying to address issues in nonprofit sectors, right? Issues with health and disease, nutrition, things of that nature, education. So they're expanding their skills way beyond some sort of business metric into these huge human issues. Some people focusing on, outer space. Some people are focusing under exploring our oceans. I mean, the environment. There's all kind of stuff people focus on, right? Because you have these skills and you have this confidence. You have this thing where you turn your thoughts into action. And just because you achieve some things in your business and in your career, doesn't mean you're going to sit around doing nothing, because we've talked about in other shows that can lead to unhealthy outcomes, right? That's not a good use of our time. We should be doing something. And some people apply it again to solving challenges on our planet, or again within different sectors. Some people are looking at issues beyond our planet, I mean, you pick it, you pick a thing, and you can, or any idea or anything you're interested in, you can take your same skills, that same confidence, and apply it. The challenge is, though, as we're doing this, there's a potential, okay, that what we're doing also is resulting in us having diminished patience. We have less patience. We have less tolerance for when things don't go our way because we're used to things going our way. I have another quote in the show notes. Again, this is episode 166. Come to CourtneyAnderson.com to the show page, episode page. There's another quote in there that's a great article, I think, from Inc. Magazine, and it's all about how entrepreneurs think. And of course, we have a whole series about entrepreneurship, and I'm a lifelong entrepreneur, and this is one of my favorite things to teach and talk about and to study and to do, right? Building things. Entrepreneurs build business ideas. And so it's an interesting article about some research into how the mind works of somebody who is an entrepreneur. And there's a section in there where they sort of talk about this idea that entrepreneurs have this mental framework, do the doable and then push it. Do the doable and then push it. And the article's got some other really great points that actually, many of those points I'm going to integrate into other shows, but it's talking about the difference between somebody who's an entrepreneur who builds something out of thin air, it's their imagination, versus somebody who goes in an organization that's already existing and then takes that to the highest level, an executive. And so the differences between those, right? Because one person steps into a situation it already exists. They can make it better. They can reimagine it. They can enhance it. They can do a lot. That's a different skill set. And they look at things differently than somebody who is starting with just nothing, just a blank piece of paper, just their imagination. Because you can't go into a situation where nothing exists with the same mindset you would if something already exists and you were going to try to change it, improve it, sustain it. That's a completely different mindset. And this idea of do the doable and then push it is about this sort of entrepreneur idea. I'm going to do what I consider to be doable, what I think you can do, and then I'm going beyond that because I don't even know what's possible. Especially since I'm imagining all of it at the beginning of the entrepreneurial experience, which is why I talk so much about it. Being art, how your business is art, is because it's very similar in many ways to somebody who writes a song, or a poem, or paints a painting. There's nothing there at the beginning. It's just nothing. And they create out of their imagination they build this thing. It didn't exist before. Exactly like that. That song exactly like that, something exactly like that with exactly those chords, with exactly that tempo. Nope, didn't exist. Because if it did, then they stole it from somebody else, and that would be a intellectual property infringement problem. And it's amazing what we can do, right? And so to me, what's really it's the agony and the ecstasy of that, right? Of the creating from the nothing. And that's what the entrepreneur's doing, right? Because nothing exists. It's just all in their imagination at the early sort of genesis of it. And that's exciting. But that's a really different mindset. So if you have somebody whose mindset is, I'm going to take nothing and create something out of it, a song, a poem, a business, sometimes an industry, an invention, whatever, that personality type, you can see why. They're very action oriented. And they're so action oriented that they'll take literally nothing and just from their own thoughts create something, especially when it's novel, right? And when it's an original and it's never been done like that, or it never existed like that before. That's just so beautiful. But it's also it's rare. But when somebody has that mindset, that entrepreneur who also has gotten to the point where they have reached satisfaction, saturation, goodness gracious, what are the side effects of this type of drive, of this type of creativity, of this type of belief in your own abilities? Because remember, whoever it is that's these creative contributors, nobody's told them this. Nobody could tell them how to do it. Nobody could train them. Nobody could teach it to them. They really made that song up. They created that painting. They contributed to that new business. That came from them. And if you have that sort of heightened level of confidence to think of it, because I think many of us have the ability to think of these things. I just think that very few of us have the ability to turn our thoughts into action, and then to take that action and put it into the world and be assertive enough and methodical enough and tenacious enough to turn it into a song that we hear on the radio, or an artist piece that we see in a museum, or uh, you know a screenplay that we watch at the movie theater, or a business or service or product that we purchase. It's a manifestation of it. Because there's a ton of challenges to that, right? One of the largest, of course, is all the people standing around saying, "Well, that you're not going to be able to do anything. You're silly to think that you're going to write a song, or make write a play, or create some business." A lot of times, people have incredible negative input from people very close to them. Sometimes everybody tells them they're a silly idiot. you know, it's rare that you read a narrative where somebody says, "Oh yeah, I was in an environment where I was given the time and the money and all of the emotional support, and everyone said to me, 'You can do it, you can do it.' And then I went out and I did it, and I created my, sculpting, and it was so easy." You rarely hear that. I mean, the narrative you usually hear is, "It was really hard. I said I wanted to be a singer. Everyone laughed at me. I told people I was going to be a poet. They told me I was an idiot to get a real job. I told people I was going to come up with this new business idea, and they laughed at me and said I was too young or too old or too stupid. And that was the dumbest thing I ever heard." It's usually what you hear. So the person who has the personality that pushed through that and believed enough in their own ideas is rare. So if you believe so much in your own ideas, then the challenge, of course, is as you accomplish more and more of these things that were honestly in your mind just sort of imaginary in the beginning, you surpass those goals. I can see logically why the person starts to believe that they deserved it. And many times when you'll talk to people, they'll go, if you'll ask them how they did it, and they'll want to tell you a long story, and they're often, I think, in some ways trying to justify being in the position they are today. Right, so I'll talk about how hard it was and all the things they dealt with and all the challenges and the obstacles. Partially because often it's factual. They want people to know that this was not easy. I did this against incredible obstacles. I did it through facing all kind of negative consequences. Some people were financially ruined, or risked their future, and then still kept going. I mean, so part of it is that's factual. Many times we can document that they're telling an accurate event narration of what happened. The other part of it is, though, once somebody gets to the point where they do surpass these goals, especially when they've surpassed multiple goals, and time goes by, and it does create this lifestyle for them where they have more options, there are these challenges with then feeling of dealing with people who might not be in the same position, sometimes who aren't very nice, right? And other people say, "Oh, it must be nice for you. It must be nice for you to be, CEO of the big company, or to, made it to the highest rank as an enlisted officer in the military. It must be nice for you." And people will get really kind of defensive and want to say, "Well, no, it's not. It's nice now. Of course, I appreciate being, an E9, which is the enlisted." The highest rank for an enlisted member in some branches of the military in the U.S. Right? My father was in the military. So if somebody said yes, or if somebody said, "Hey, I'm in the highest rank of an officer," I'm a 5-star general, which you don't see out in real life really, but they could be a general, right? Must be nice, must be nice, must be nice to be vice president, must be nice to have won the award for your music, must be nice to have gotten the promotion, must be nice to be salesperson of the month, right? And you get all this sort of pushback from people. And so sometimes people get defensive and want to sort of go through this long story to try to say, "Look, yeah, it is nice now, but I didn't just sort of wake up here. I had to spend however many decades or years, or maybe I didn't spend that many years. Maybe I'm only 21 years old, but I spent a lot of time on this, and I also took huge risks. I took risks that nobody else did, and I had ideas that if somebody else had them, they didn't step up to do anything with it." And one of the things that I'm coming to mind here, now Facebook, the social media, I don't. It's not anything I know anything about, and as of the time we're making this program, I've never used it. But I did see the movie about it, right? For multiple reasons, because it was put together and written by people that I'm a fan of, their talent. So I saw the movie, right? So in the movie out was about, sort of the founder, and then all these lawsuits that happened. And of course, the lawyer in me loves, a movie about business and lawsuits. What else would I be happier to sit through? Because some of my favorite areas, law, business, this is a dream come true. And I really did enjoy the movie, obviously written very well, the dialogue. But the interesting scene that's coming to my mind right now is there's a scene, and this is totally from memory, but where the character is playing the founder of Facebook, who started, of course, as a young person in their university school, dormitory housing. Okay, so there's fast forward, the business is succeeding, and of course then everybody comes out of the woodwork with ideas, and where's their part of the money, which happens in any business, from what I've seen and experienced. So all people have sued this founder, and they're all these claims that they helped create, or they did create some part or whatever. And there's a line, and again, this is from memory, so I'm sure it's inaccurate, but the character who created Facebook says something to one of the people, one of the lawyers or simple people in these meeting rooms. We're talking about the cases. Says something on the lines of, if he, or if this other person had created Facebook, they would have created Facebook, right? If they thought it up and they created it, then we wouldn't even be sitting here. I'm now going on my own my editorial to the argument, but the line was something like, if they'd created Facebook, they would have created Facebook. They would have made it. It wouldn't have been them coming along later and trying to say something that they, added to what I did. It would have been like their thing. And I totally, the business person in me, the lawyer in me who's handled these types of cases where people fight over, a business, was like, yes. Right? Because if they would have done it, they would have done it. They didn't do it. Now, they might be saying that they did something that might have related to it or whatever. I'm not arguing over the nuances of that case because I don't know anything beyond like what I've read in movies and read and seen in movies. So I don't have any actual data or information on. And that's not the point. The point simply is that if somebody has the kind of drive and the kind of tenacity and the kind of focus, especially when they get a lot of negative feedback, people are telling them this is stupid or it's not going to work or you're an idiot or you should quit or whatever, and they keep going, then usually if the consequence works out where it did succeed at some level, it does in their often, we learn, we teach ourselves. So for many people, it teaches them, I was right to stick with this. And I don't think necessarily want to go into something and have an outcome that they're less patient. We think of a stereotype of a super wealthy person, or someone who's royalty or something, especially historical depictions where you read about people who are born into royalty and how they treat other people, and often that they are demanding and intolerant and spoiled and catered to, and they think they're better than the people who aren't royalty, and of course we as humans, we don't want to be that. We don't want other people to perceive that of us. We don't want to be that thing. The challenge though in the show, in this episode, is how do you simultaneously, I think in a healthy way, acknowledge the positive outcomes of your choices and celebrate or feel good about those, and yet not fall prey to the side effect of becoming so intolerant, so impatient, having so little compassion and empathy. So one of the things that I also have in the show notes that I think that will potentially be a solution, right? That's the whole name of the show. Solutions with Courtney Anderson. The whole purpose of us talking about all these things is not to just sit around and talk about, oh, that's a thing, but it's to talk about what do we do about it? What do we do with it? How do we respond to it or prepare for it, right? Solutions. So one of the things that may be something we can use as a countermeasure to counteract these potential side effects is this idea of gratitude. So if you look in the show notes, you'll see this sentence, and it's to a Foreign Affairs publication article. And it says, conversely, feelings of gratitude induced by asking participants to recount their positive past experience made people more willing to tolerate delays. So it's coming from some research, and it's saying that the feeling of gratitude made people more willing to tolerate something, to tolerate a delay. So remember, we're dealing with impatience and also a lack of tolerance, that somebody just can't stand when things aren't going their way. And again, when you have these this track record where you've surpassed your goals, when you have your opportunities and available options to not tolerate something, to not be patient, often people will exercise those. And they're, I don't think, I mean, some people, of course, really are just narcissists and unhealthy and egomaniacs and some really unhealthy, poor choices. I think my argument is the majority of people aren't. But the circumstances put you in situations where you're so used to having options that when you don't have the options, you're less willing to immediately sort of fall in line with that, because you're going to keep thinking, well, there must be another way, right? If there's a will, there's a way. And the person who has a lot of confidence and a track record of assertiveness, they typically will. That's what, in their mind, I don't think the person, again, except for that sort of person who's so unhealthy and so overblown with their ego and narcissism problems. I'm excluding that group. But the sort of average person who, made a lot of choices, surpassed their goals, and over a period of successes, built up to a point where they have more options. When you have more options, usually you use them. And that person, again, isn't doing that thinking, oh, I'm showing how impatient I am and how intolerant I am. What they're often thinking is, I'm fixing this, right? I don't have to wait in the line. I can just, pay the extra fee for the other option, and then I'll not have to wait in line. And they're not doing that necessarily, again, to be impatient or intolerant, but they're just thinking, well, there's got to be another option. Everyone else in the line, if there's, let's say that we're using a line, is thinking the same thing. I don't like this line either. But other people may have a different level of tolerance and patience just because they're used to not getting what they want when they want it, or they're not used to getting what they want at all. And you'll often see this again with people who have options. If you'll go to a really fancy restaurant, people sometimes will have a very heightened level of expectations for the food and for the service, and they're not at all embarrassed to say, this wasn't how I, requested it. Could we, change some of this or send it back to the kitchen? Often, again, it's not meant to be impatient or intolerant or anything in a negative. It's just that in their mind, they're thinking, well, hey, I'm paying a premium amount for this premium, meal, and I'm excited to have it. I just want it to be awesome. And so it wasn't quite awesome, and so let me just share so I can be more awesome. In their mind, that's where they're coming from. It comes off, of course, for the stereotype that we have of, oh, well, that's how those people are. They, they have to have it their way. They're so particular. They're so picky. We don't want to be that. We want to surpass our goals and have all this ability to be of service to ourselves, meaning be kind, feel good about our lives, be of service to our communities, to other people. And we don't want to be that person who's perceived as, callous and selfish. Yet, if we're not honest about this potential side effect, it's going to creep up on us. And as we come to the conclusion of this show, I'll share an example. So a couple of years ago, it was getting close to my birthday, and there were some relatives I had that were going on a trip. It was totally unrelated to me. Already, they were going on a trip overseas. And so I thought, wow, okay, well, that's, the timing of their trip meant that they'd be on the trip while my birthday happened. And I thought, well, I'll go along with them, and then I'll be on the trip too. And then I'll get to spend my birthday in this really awesome city overseas. And overseas was all relative, so it was a trip to Italy. And I love Italy, and I'd worked in Italy many times, giving training and speeches and training and corporate education programs, and I was super psyched and excited. Okay. So go along on the trip, everything's going along, but because it was a group, I didn't have the ability to book the whole itinerary and to book the hotels. It was already preset with this group of people that were already going. And some of the people in the group happened to be some relatives of mine, so I thought, okay, I'll just sort of hitch on to the trip. Let's remember that all the other times I've been to Italy, or when I make other trips, I'm either completely in charge of where I'm staying and what flight I'm booking and what time we're leaving and the itinerary, in concert, of course, with my work requirements, right, with where I'm going for work and my client and all that. But I mean, I'm making the decision, so I'm not often in a position where somebody else is making all the decisions and I don't have any input or option. So that was a challenge. So make a long story short, the embarrassing part of this is we got to so we were going to multiple cities, right? This is a multiple city trip, and so it's going along, it's lovely, and we get to one of the cities, and of course I didn't have any control over booking the lodging or anything, but we got to one of the places where we were staying, one of the hotels, and it wasn't kind of the type of hotel I would want to stay in. So when we got there, I saw the accommodations and I thought, oh goodness, ooh, my goodness, goodness, this is not really the right hotel, that I normally stay in terms of just the facilities. It was one of these places where they have shared restrooms in the hallway for people and different rooms to share. Now that's fine if you're, you know, going to a hostel and you're out and especially for young people in many parts of the world, they go, traveling. Some places have what they call a gap year, where a young person sort of takes time between their early education and going forward to formal education, and they just sort of travel around, for low cost, and they're just having fun. That wasn't exactly what this was. A, I wasn't, I was a couple of decades late for that, and B, it just wasn't what in terms of safety, in terms of amenities, it wasn't exactly what I'm used to. So when I saw the accommodations, the first thing I thought was, okay, this is not awesome. And then I was talking to other people on this group, right, on the group tour. Some were some relatives, and many of them, most of them, in fact, weren't. They were just other people along for this trip for these other reasons, that the group had put the trip together. And so, and everybody's talking and saying similar things, like, "Oh, this is really not, awesome, right?" So I thought, well, since we all agree it's not awesome, then in my mind, the most logical thing we're going to do is go somewhere else, right? So I pull out my tablet and I start going online, like trying to find a place like right now, which is tough, as we all know, right? When you're traveling anywhere, it's tough to find a hotel like right now. But I did it. And I went to one of my relatives and I said, okay, I found a place that says it has some availability. And I'm going to, go get on the water taxi. This happened to be in Venice, and get over there as quickly as I can. Cause we need to get to a hotel and, get settled in before they, give these rooms away. And so all of this time, I'm thinking that everybody's on the same page. I'm thinking we're all on the same page. We're all making the same decision. Everybody pretty much agreed, like, this is not awesome, this hotel. So let's just go somewhere else. Is in my mind what we would do, right? That's what you do. You have a solution. The challenge is, though, I didn't think or even stop to think about, what are everybody's individual, situations in terms of we'd prepaid, when we agreed to go on the trip for the rooms and all of this. And so I didn't stop to think, well, maybe somebody would feel like, hey, I already prepaid for this room, even though it might not be awesome, I'll just make it work, right? And they don't want to go spend more money to go get another hotel when you already have a hotel that we've already paid for. I didn't put that through my thinking. I just thought, we can't stay here. Like, we've all agreed this is not awesome. And potentially, maybe not the safest place. And so all that's to explain that I did exactly what I said I was going to do. I went, found the new hotel, turned out to be, really, really nice, and wonderful. And I booked myself in there and I went over there and stayed there. And I thought I was just doing something that was what we'd all sort of discussed when we sort of were talking as groups and saying, this is really not awesome, the other hotel. I didn't realize and I didn't understand that it would be perceived as not compassionate or empathetic to the group. And that exactly what I didn't think about. Then later, when I went to dinner to see, the people everyone else stayed at the other place, people were like not happy, right? And I didn't understand why, because I'm thinking we all agreed that this place was not, where we wanted to stay. And the fact that I thought, well, that means when when something happens you don't like, then you just go change it and go do something else. That's the mindset of the person who has the ability and the resources to do that. And that's what I wasn't paying attention to. To me, it was, what was the big deal? It was just, whatever. I mean, it wasn't like I was saying, let's go find the most expensive hotel in the history of the universe, that's thousands of dollars or thousands of euro a night. No, of course not. I was finding something that was nice, and that was a regularly priced, in my mind, amount that you pay for a nice hotel. So it wasn't extravagant in my mind. This is all relative. But by leaving the group, it created a huge psychological stress, because my perception is, and I do see how this entire show, that other people perceived it not well. I perceived it as simply fixing a challenge, right? Like, we'll just go somewhere else. And the group was large, so it wasn't like, I can't remember how large it was, but it was, I don't know, somewhere around 20 people, somewhere around there. It wasn't like I was going to say, I'll pay for all 20 people to all go to brand new hotels. To me, and it's all adults, and it's all, so I just wasn't, cognizant and aware when all I'm thinking is challenge, solution. This is a good thing. I didn't understand or stop to realize that I am used to having things sort of, the way I expect them to be. And when they aren't in a situation like that, and this has happened before. I mean, I've not in a long time, but there have been times before I started taking over all my own travel requirements where I used to let other vendors that I was doing speeches with, I'd let them book travel. And sure enough, I'd get there and oh, this is awful. And then I just go do the exact same thing I did on this trip. More recently, I would just leave that hotel and I'd eat the money because I felt like what's the point? It's just to me it wasn't that much money, and I felt like, well, I'll just go find a nice place to stay. And even though it's a huge inconvenience for me, what I started to do then was take over all my own booking and travel in-house, irrespective of the client, or work in conjunction with the client's travel agency to make sure that didn't happen. So to me, this isn't anything new or different or anything weird. In my mind, I thought, and I still would think probably, well, that's why we work. I mean, the whole purpose of me going on a voluntary trip, to Italy, which it wasn't work related. I was going there voluntarily just because I wanted to sort of go look at some stuff I hadn't been to. And I thought that would be nice, around my birthday. It was all voluntary. So my point in my head is that's why I work. That's why I've worked and done all these things for all these years, is so I have the opportunity, to go on trips whenever I feel, I feel up to it, or places I want to go, and then I go those places. And then I'm always trying to make cognizant decisions of, safety and making sure that I'm staying in places that I'm comfortable. And I've done this in all parts of, all over the world, in India and South Africa and everywhere. And what I'm doing right now is also, I'm defensive, right? Because I don't see myself as someone who's not compassionate or empathetic at all, right? I see myself as in many ways, I'm too compassionate. I'm too sensitive, right? I have this habit of, I do too much. I want to save everybody and every problem in the world, right? But it was a side effect of the goals I've surpassed, that it wasn't, and there weren't any perceived obstacles in my mind other than you have to find a place and then try to get there and then try to make sure they don't sell a room before you get there. That was the only hassle in my mind. It wasn't, oh, I don't have the money, or I don't have the ability to do this, or I didn't even think about any of that. And so that's an example of my own sort of anecdote, that you do get used to things sort of going how you anticipate because you control a lot of things. Especially as you have more career and or financial opportunities. That's what those tools are there for, is to allow you more autonomy, opportunity. So you're used to exercising it, and you have to be aware when you're not patient. And even though often when I'll talk to some of my close friends, and they'll say, well, yeah, I do the same thing. That's what you do, right? If you're at a restaurant, or and it's not what you expected, and you just ask if they can address it. If you're at a hotel and it's not what you anticipated, you just ask them nicely and politely. That seems normal. But I also understand that it's a certain mindset that sees the world like that, and that this challenge with the more things have had positive outcomes in your life, the more it opens up opportunities for you to do sort of more things that you enjoy, which is that's the reason most people pursue all these professional goals and financial goals. The challenge, of course, though, as they work, I sort of hate the language, it puts you in a position where you're used to things working. And then when they don't work, you immediately start thinking, well, I'll have to try and fix this and make it work, without understanding sort of the context, a larger context that you're dealing with. Maybe that's a situation I should have prepared better on that trip and been ready to just sort of go with the flow, and not offend anybody else. And the thing that the solution is this idea of gratitude, right? That that you have to remind yourself, hey, I'm lucky to be here at all, alive. Much less lucky to be on some trip, or lucky to be at a fancy restaurant, or lucky to be whatever. And that'll help reorient you and remind you that, yeah, maybe the meal at the fancy restaurant wasn't exactly cooked to your request, maybe whatever, but you need to be so grateful and appreciative and change your perspective on it that it'll make you more tolerant. And this is a challenge. I've been to on all types of social occasions with people, really fancy restaurants, and especially when people are treating me and trying to do something really nice for me, and then they get really stressed out sometimes, like, oh, about the service or whatever. And I'm like, this is a fabulous restaurant. You're treating me here, and it's so wonderful, and I'm so happy. I have to calm them down and help remind them, like, I'm grateful. On the same token, though, I've done this myself. I'm sure, where people have felt like, oh, I can't believe that, she wasn't more patient. And again, it's that trap you get into when you're used to having choices and options. And your first response when something isn't going as you would anticipate is to try to fix it. And the challenge is that we have to step back. And there's two parts. A, prepare yourself before you go to the event or the place or the trip or whatever. And think about the entirety of it. And the second thing is, in a lot of instances, when you sit there and do the gratitude work and you start reminding yourself, how fortunate are you really to be in any of these opportunities? And forget that. How fortunate are you to be alive? You can see, you can hear, you can touch, you can taste, you can walk. So, and that'll help change that behavior. But this is a challenge. And like I said at the outset, it's something that's uncomfortable for a lot of us to talk about. It is a real issue for those who have, who reach these satisfaction saturation points, because you do tend to then have more control over your options, and you have more options, period. And so you're used to exercising them, and it becomes really difficult for you when you're in situations where you're not able to do so, or you're able to do so but you're with other people who aren't, maybe, and you have to think about that. You also want to continue to be vigilant with yourself and remind yourself. This whole idea of gratitude, that's that link there. You can go read it. It's mostly talking about economic and sort of global economic issues and global poverty, but the arguments, I think, are really applicable here. We must remind ourselves, yes, maybe the people messed up the service, maybe the place wasn't what you expected, maybe your building contractor is not doing something that they're supposed to. You need to stop and and use your gratitude tool to calm down, control your emotional reaction, control your language and your behavior, so that you're not rude, so that you're not inappropriate. And it may be a situation sometimes where you really are being unrealistic, and you really need to stop and realize, none of us, excluding the group that's sort of an egomaniac, narcissistic, or unhealthy individual, we don't want to be that stereotypical person who's just so particular and they want it their way and you can never please them, and blah blah blah. We're not that. We don't want to be that. We're just action people, right? So we talked about that. We have confidence, and we're used to action. And so when we're in a situation that to us seems like, oh, it's not working, we want to take action. And in many instances, that's admirable, and it's successful, and it's quote unquote a good thing. But in some instances, it is not. It is not. And the question, of course, how you determine when it is and when it isn't is a very sophisticated one. We're going to do other programs to try to work through some of that. But the short answer is, stop and do your gratitude check. What your gratitude check is, okay, I'm so fortunate to be alive. I'm so fortunate, again, I can hear and see or taste or walk, or if I can do any of these things, right? And then start walking yourself backwards. If it's not, especially it's not related to life or death, because in those instances you need to be as assertive as you have to be. This isn't even related maybe to your business, right? You got to start working it backwards and realize, like, relax. And you need to experience situations where you're not in control, and you're going to have to pull out those. They're going to be rusty, right? Your patience and tolerance skills are going to be a little rusty because you're sort of used to having more of your needs met in a different time frame. But it's a really good thing to be in that situation where you do have to just sit there and shut up, and you're not in control, and you're going to have to just wait. Because it's gonna really help reinforce that, and sometimes you have to maybe artificially create that. Maybe you may actually in your mind or think, well, I have the resources, I could just not have to do this. But if it's going to be better for you to experience having to be in a situation where you have to be patient, then do it. We must expose ourselves to those situations so that we continue to have a realistic perspective on life, so we don't just get in these little boxes where we see things in a little narrow way based on things that have happened in our lives, and based on these expectations we have for doing it, quote unquote, our way. So again, this was a tough series. This whole series is tough. Satisfaction, saturation. It's exciting and awesome, but these are tough questions, and they're not really addressed in a lot of our resources because we want to skip over what happens after you surpass your goals. We're not going to do that. We're going to handle these tough questions. This was a tough episode. I want to encourage you again, spread the show on social media. Please let me know your ideas and feedback. Thank you for being part of our community. Leave your ratings for us on iTunes and other show distribution panels and opportunities around the world, Stitcher, things of that nature. And thank you for being here.